I greet you, dear subscribers. Welcome to today's presentation of the Fathers of Nations. I'm Alfred Omwenga, a teacher of English and Literature at St. Charles Luanga Girls National School. I'm also an examiner and an author. Today I look at the thematic concerns or themes. A theme can also be called a social concern. A theme is the central idea in a work of art or an idea that recurs or pervades in a work of literature. And when we talk of a work of literature, we can talk about a novel, a play like The Samaritan. It can also be a poem or a short story, for example, a silent song and other short stories. The first theme is bad governance or poor leadership. We start with Gambia. The president of Gambia shows bad leadership when hosting the 49 heads of state. Before dignitaries arrive, bulldozers are dispatched at night in slum clearance exercises. They demolish roadside kiosks on which whole families depend for their livelihood. This way the dignitaries will see that a few streets once had sidewalks. That's on page 11. Also, roads get rare layers of tarmac at times of maximum traffic. This way motorists come to a standstill when it really hurts. That's on page 11. Thirdly, checkpoints sprout everywhere. This way guards get even more basis for extorting bribes from passerbys. That's on page 11. Moreover, when the dignitaries finally arrive, water taps at which whole neighborhoods queue to get just buckets of water dry up. Now all water has to go to new water fountains built to mesmerize the visitors. That's on page 11. Another example of poor leadership is seen by the 49 heads of state who are in Banjul for the summit. All looked happy, and why not? Had they not escaped from troublemakers in their home countries? That's on page 10. Heads of states are supposed to address problems in their home countries instead of celebrating that they are away from them. On the other hand, poor leadership is also evident in Kenya. Professor Kimani blames the government for not providing security. Professor Kimani views the growth of guarding in Kenya with disapproval. He considered it a symptom of failure by the state to ensure the safety of its citizens. That's on page 26. Another example, Africa's heads of state are seen as people who cannot direct their countries. They toy with two different ideas, that is Way Omega and Pad Alpha, which originate from different places. Way Omega is an ideological position that is conceived by 20 Nobel laureates who discover a way to develop Africa and then publish the discovery. That's on page 7. Pad Alpha is Agda's ideological position, whose headquarters are in Cape Town, South Africa. That's page 44. At the summit, the presidents are to discuss Way Omega, but from nowhere, Pad Alpha finds itself on the summit's agenda. Minister Tikonzitu opposes the contribution of standard procedure and tells the chair that he should have sought the approval of the heads of state for that to happen. That's on page 153. Again, the fight that erupts in the summit between presidents, Dibonso and the chair, is a sign of poor leadership. Dibonso opposes the choice matrix and the win of Pad Alpha. The pistol clicked. It was ready to start spitting fire at the chair. That's on page 183. Again, the chair of the summit, His Excellency Miniko Menkit, is biased. He doesn't give room to dissenting voices from summiteers such as Minister Tikonzitu. He warns him, a word more out of you and I'll have guards escort you out of the hall. Do I make myself clear? That's on page 153. Further, the picking of President Bangura to chair the Method Committee is a sign of poor leadership. This because he claims that he has not read the two documents, that is Way Omega and Pad Alpha. He even promises that he will not read them. Ironically, he is selected to chair the Method Committee. That's on page 159. Finally, we can look at Nigeria. Pastor Chiamaka's arrest for criticizing the government is a sign of bad governance. Nigeria is bedeviled by the problem of riots and fires that consume the city. Instead of the president addressing the issues conclusively, he writes a memo. That's on page 114. The memo advises his officers to treat recent events with caution. That's on page 115. That is all with poor leadership, but you can get more illustrations from the novel. Theme number 2 is poverty, or you can call it impoverishment. In Africa, educated people like Professor Kemani live in abject poverty. Professor Kemani cannot afford to service his old Toyota car. When Tuni asks to use it, Professor Kemani tells her that the car is down. That's on page 29. Professor Kemani's predicament is as a result of the impunity of Kenyan MPs. He recalls when he started teaching, MPs earned less than professors. That's on page 23. Now each MP takes up to 100 times income a professor makes. That's on page 23. Moreover, Gambia makes her citizens poor when hosting 49 heads of state. Before the dignitaries arrive, bulldozers dispatched at night in slum clearance exercises demolish roadside kiosks on which whole families depend for their livelihood. That's on page 11. We can see that under poor leadership in theme number 1. You can see the illustration actually overlaps for poor leadership and also poverty. We can also look at Zimbabwe, whereby it's not easy for people to eat in a hotel. According to Comrade Merusi, for someone to eat in a hotel, a visitor or a foreigner must foot the bill. Their economy had crashed. That is on page 86. We are told when Comrade at Chaminuka restaurant, it is 1:30 p.m. and actually the hotel looks like a funeral parlor because there is no one there except for Comrade Merusi and Tadilongwe. That is because of poverty. Further in Zimbabwe, the economy undergoes harsh times. The international community clams on Zimbabwe a program called Structural Adjustment Program, or SAP. The program wanted to revive Zimbabwe's economy by restructuring. That is on page 94. However, Comrade Melusi says it did not succeed. So the people of Zimbabwe continued wallowing in poverty. Finally, we can see what the Gambia News pays its reporters. The Gambia News pays its reporters peanuts. Fiona, who works for it, is paid 2 beans. As part of a live-on loan arrangement, the VOA would be paying her a salary, totally dwarfing the 2 beans the Gambian News had been paying her. That's on page 49. This is an indication that Gambia is impoverished. Thirdly, we look at the theme of corruption. In Gambia, bribery is rampant. Before the dignitaries arrive, roads get rare layers of tarmac at times of maximum traffic. Motorists come to a standstill when it really hurts. Checkpoints sprout everywhere. This way, guards get even more basis for extorting bribes from passerbys. That's on page 11. Still in Gambia, Fiona is stopped at act number 22. The police demand a bribe from her driver, an unemployed graduate. The driver tells Fiona, essentially, they wanted something small. Further, Mr. Tad Longwe tells Dr. Falabi that Africa in its present state has 2 new arrivals. That is corruption and impunity. The first is a crime that the second protects from punishment. The second is another crime the first rewards with kickbacks. That's on page 72. Finally, we can talk about election rigging in Zimbabwe, which is a form of corruption. Comrade Merusi and other candidates together garner 1% of the total votes, whereas the ruler gets 99%. Comrade Merusi asked Tadilongwe, now tell me, how did the man win the election when Zimbabwe had been doing badly and everything spells his defeat? That's on page 95. This is because he rigged the results. Again, when you look at the summit, the snaking of Brother Alpha to the summit agenda is fraudulent. It goes against the standard procedure as lamented by Minister Nzitu. Even the way it wins seems predetermined. Thank you, viewers, for subscribing to the channel.